Hi, folks. Thanks for watching my monologue. As America starts to reopen, just remember that guns, etc., never closed. They still have over 10,200 square feet of ammo, firearms, and accessories, including safes, and they remain open for business. Stop by their huge store in Mesa or just click on gunsetcetera.com. And if you like my monologues, please subscribe to 960 The Patriots YouTube channel. Thanks. Welcome back and happy May 29th, 2020. Total idiocy. Why in hell would the state police arrest a CNN crew in Minneapolis? Don't get me wrong. I hate almost all of CNN and what it stands for, but I also want some healing. And if you don't want us to think you are totally incompetent fools, don't do totally incompetent and foolish things. I'll tell you something. If you watch the video of the incident, the CNN reporter, whatever else you think of the network, or for that matter, him, he couldn't have been more polite, asking again and again where the police would rather he be and whether he should go somewhere else. So the troopers arrest him, just as, theoretically, they want goodwill from the rest of the country. Now, at this point, let me remind, state troopers work for a Democratic governor in Minnesota, and they were acting in Minneapolis, which is a wholly run Democratic Party municipality, with a Democratic mayor and a Democratic and Green Party city council. Now perhaps leftists can stop telling us it's conservative who want police states, stand for the defense of police and sensitivity, or worse. Maybe now, too, we can hear about how it is Democrats who engage in wars against the media. Has Donald Trump ever arrested a CNN reporter? There is such a thing as Mercedes Marxism and Cadillac communism, and it's far more racist than any conservative I've ever met. Van Jones, also of CNN, put my sentiments exactly rightly this way last night in talking about what you saw in Minneapolis yesterday. He said, quote, "It's not the racist white person who is in the Ku Klux Klan that we have to worry about. It's the white liberal Hillary Clinton supporter walking her dog in Central Park who would tell you right now, I don't see race. Race is no big deal to me. I see us all the same. I give to charities. I give to the Democrats. But the minute she sees a black man who she does not respect or who she has a slight thought against, she weaponizes race like she has been trained by the Aryan nation. A Klans member could not have been better trained to pick up her phone and tell the police a black man, an African-American man, was after her to come and get him, or to warn him that she would do so. So even the most liberal, well-intentioned white person has a virus in his or her brain. It can be activated at an instant," Van Jones continues. And so what you have been seeing now is a curtain falling away. And those of us who have been burdened by this very minute, every second of our entire lives, are fragile right now. We're fragile right now because we are tired. And so I appreciate people who have been reaching out. I've had people reaching out to me for 2 days now, expressing their empathy and sympathy. My only prayer, look in the mirror at how you choke off black opportunity, how you choke off black dignity, how you behave in ways that make it harder for African Americans to rise in your profession, in your place of work, on your campus, in your houses of worship. And start working on that, because this is the last domino of a whole series of dominoes that have been falling for a very long time, close quote. You want a good example, or another good example of what Van Jones is talking about? And recall, he's a lefty African-American former Obama advisor. Might it just be assuming that race determines thought and ideology? Is there anything more Third Reich than that? There is not. Here might be a modern-day example. Quote, "If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black." Close quote. You don't get more ideology is determined by race than that. Maybe we're finally finding the bark of this lie come off the poisonous trunk of the blighted tree it's been nurtured upon. Now, if I may go back to Plato's fetching argument in his Meno that so much of our knowledge is already tucked away within us, and it becomes a matter then of drawing out the things we come to feel that we have known all along, that is, unlocking the things we used to know. In this case, I'd like to go back to the early and mid-1970s, after we came out of a great deal of urban unrest. One of the great public intellectuals of our age, a Harvard professor named Edward Banfield, wrote The Heavenly City, and then he wrote The Heavenly City Revisited. Banfield was a professor of many great other public intellectuals, like James Q. Wilson and Harvey Mansfield, and he was an advisor to presidents. He was, one might say, really one of the most famous political scientists of the 60s and 70s. In his book, he wrote a chapter titled Rioting for Fun and Profit. He was denounced for that, but it is what he found. Most riots were not about much more than that. And he wrote this in 1968. The rioters knew they had little or nothing to fear from the police and the courts. Under the pressure of the civil rights movement and of court decisions, and as the result of growing professionalism of police administrators, the patrolman's discretion in the use of force declined rapidly after the war. At the same time, courts were lenient with juvenile offenders. Tough kids had always attacked policemen when they got the chance, but by the 1960s, the amount of toughness required was not very great. For in most cities, it became more and more apparent that a policeman who shot a boy would be in serious trouble. Not being able to use force, the police could not effectively use the threat of force. It was not uncommon for a gang of boys to disarm, beat a policeman who, following orders, would not use his gun against him. During a riot, the police were especially ineffective because their offenses were not very serious. Most rioters could not be successfully threatened. The only thing that could be done with them was take them into custody, and this was something the police were seldom numerous enough to do. Sometimes the police had to stand by and allow looting to go on before their very eyes. This, of course, increased the tempo of the rioting, close quote. He then broke down riots into 4 categories. 1, rampages, where young men are simply looking for trouble and act out violently. 2, pillaging, where theft is the main focus and the riot serves as a solution for a type of collective action problem for thieves. 3, righteous indignation, where people act against an insult against their community. And 4, demonstrations, which are neither spontaneous nor violent, but instead designed for specific political purposes. What we clearly don't have here in Minneapolis or St. Paul are demonstrations. We have violence. We have looting. We have arson. We have rampages and pillaging. And we have total lawless surrender to thugs, an abandonment of the field of law and order, an abandonment and resignation to illegality and criminality. And it is, of course, getting worse and spreading. I give you Minneapolis yesterday, where the mayor, a Democrat, allowed a police headquarters to be burned to the ground. Scott Johnson of Minneapolis put it this way, quote, "The 3rd Precinct Police Headquarters at 30th and Minnehaha was torched and burned to the ground. The authorities let it burn to the ground. Law enforcement is invisible. We have reverted to a Hobbesian state of nature, a la Lord of the Flies. The crime spree spread from Minneapolis to St. Paul and points elsewhere. More than 170 St. Paul businesses have been looted or damaged, while dozens of fires have been set. St. Paul had nothing to do with the death of George Floyd. It is nothing more than a target of criminal opportunity. Suburban malls fear they might be next. Civic order has broken down with astonishing speed. Mob rule has descended. Forces of order have withdrawn. Boy Mayor Jacob Fry elected to let the 3rd Precinct headquarters burn. The mayor declared at a hastily called press conference in the early morning hours overnight that he had made the decision to evacuate the building. He philosophized like a college sophomore, quote, "The symbolism of a building cannot outweigh the importance of life," close quote. He liked that thought so much he reiterated it this way: brick and mortar is not as important as life. Governor Walz called out the National Guard. The Guard declares that it has deployed 500 soldiers to Minneapolis, St. Paul, and surrounding communities. That seems a little light to me. We have a case study in the dissolution of order and the abdication of political leadership. We have a pandemic of liberal disorder, close quote. Yep, a bonfire of the vanities, if you will. Now, the question the whole killing of George Floyd brings up is, will his memory and life be remembered well by all this, or will it not? And will positive change come, or will it not? And if it will come, who will enforce it? The law enforcement bodies the rioters are burning down? Obviously not. Someone else? Who? All of us? That was the point, wasn't it? That if we wanted self-government, we had to have selves worthy of governing. Which begs the question, what the hell were those four cops thinking in the first place? Perhaps the same thing those state troopers who arrested CNN were thinking. They were either not thinking, they didn't care about the rest of society, or they had no concept of consequences in an age when we all know all of this is going to go viral in about 10 seconds. Perhaps these are examples not of idiocy, but what Dr. M. Scott Peck has called group evil. Group evil happens when individuals, as much as their affiliated organized entities, circles, groups, forsake their consciences. He writes, quote, "The conscience of a group can become so fragmented and diluted that it presents itself as non-existent. The plain fact of the matter is," he writes, "that any group will remain inevitably potentially conscienceless and evil until such time as each and every individual holds himself or herself directly responsible for the behavior of the whole group, the organism of which he or she is a part." Close quote. This eradication of our common mission, purpose, constitution, nation, history, humanity that we've been speaking about for years is what has caused fragmentation and dilution, such as Dr. Peck writes. You can't have e pluribus unum if you want e unum pluribus. I'm Seth Leibsohn. We'll be right back.